few samples corresponding to the cyclic prefix. Of course, you can choose the length of cyclic prefix. You can decide the size. Okay, it should be greater than the channel length. Okay, and then take the DFT, go to frequency domain, and it's the same process. Okay, that's all. We should start now. You have a lab, man?
6:30 to 6:30.
Okay. Let me know if there is a conflict. Okay, continuing the discussion from the previous lecture. So we talked about, having a fixed rate at the transmitter at a rate r bits per symbol, and transmitting the data, the coded data, through a wireless channel. And if the channel varies in time or frequency, depending on how you look at it, there will be outages. Okay? And we had an expression for the, we had a definition for the outage probability. Okay. On the other hand, if the receiver measures the total mutual information and feeds it back to the transmitter, and transmitter constructs a code, right, at a rate slightly below the mutual information that it sees at that point in time, then there is no outage. But on the other hand, the transmitted rate varies as a function of the channel variations, because the channel does change in time. Okay. Now we'll look at a very practical approach where we decide on a certain rate at the transmitter, and we transmit it through the fading channel with L independently faded taps in time domain, and we want to know what is the diversity order you will get. What is the diversity order you will get given the code rate? So we want to look at the fundamental trade-off between code rate and the diversity order. Okay. In the previous lecture, we talked about fixing the rate and getting an outage probability expression, and the slope of the outage probability curve is the diversity order. But here we are going to talk about what is the diversity order you will get given the code rate, and this is something to do with an actual channel code design. Okay, we'll not go through the design of channel codes as such here, but we'll give an expression that reveals the fundamental trade-off between diversity order and the code rate, and we'll just use it as a system design rule. Okay. Before we provide that particular trade-off between diversity order and code rate, we'll first consider a particular code design methodology that is widely adopted in the current generation of cellular systems and most of the wireless systems. This is the type of methodology that has been adopted. Okay, that is, you have a bit stream coming in. Of course, that is the data you want to transmit. Okay, and this data is encoded using a channel code of rate R. And examples for the channel codes are convolutional codes, block codes, and turbo codes. Right? Have you worked with any one particular channel code before? Block code. So you know something about it. Okay, that's good. So this is the channel code at the rate R, and you know the definition of the code rate, right? Number of input symbols divided by the number of output bits. Number of input bits divided by the number of output bits. For each one bit, if you have two output bits, then we call it a code with rate half. Right? One bit gives you 2 bits out. Okay, there is a redundancy included in this channel code. Okay, So there is a channel code at rate R, and a common practice is to interleave the output of the coded bits, and there is a reason for that. We'll see that shortly. Okay, so you interleave okay. I'll explain the reason for the existence of this interleaver. Essentially, it just takes a stream of bits and kind of randomly shuffles them in it, right? It permutes them in different order and gives the same bits, coded bits, same output. Okay? And these bits, you take a group of bits and map it to a complex symbol, a real or complex symbol. Okay? So then we have what is called bits to symbol mapping. So if you use a modulation alphabet with size m, let us say m is the size of the cardinality of the modulation alphabet. That is m array quam or something like that. You have log m base 2 bits, right, represented in one complex symbol. So you take group of log m base 2 bits from here and map it to one complex symbol. Okay? So what would be the total transmission rate in this case? This block has a rate small r, and this block has a rate log m base 2. So the total transmission rate r is equal to small r multiplied by log m base 2. R is typically less than 1. Well, it must be less than 1. Okay, if there is a channel code. But log m base 2 is typically greater than 1. The minimum size m can take is at least 2. Usually that's the practice. Okay, so what the input is bits and the output here is possibly complex symbols. Of course, if you use real valued modulation, you will have real symbols, but generally we use complex valued modulation. And this is the complex symbols, whether it is BPSK, QPSK, whatever the modulation used, that is mapped to the OFDM transmitter that we have talked about in detail. Right? That is the XK that we have produced. Okay? And you take a block of this XK and map it to one OFDM symbol. Okay? So, now the question we want to ask is, of course you do OFDM on the receiver side, you do OFDM demodulation, you get an estimate of XK, and you do what is called demodulation to get estimates of the bits contained in XK and go through channel de-interleaver and decoder. Let's see the receiver block. So receiver has, let's say this goes through OFDM. So you have a OFDM receiver okay, that includes the entire processing we talked about, and you have a demodulator, but the demodulator is usually what is called a soft demodulator. It gives you the log likelihood ratios of the bits contained in this XK, not the hard decisions but the soft decisions. Okay, and you'll have de-interleaver. Okay, and followed by the channel decoder. That gives you estimates of the bits that you are transmitting. And we have talked about, a receiver that gives you sum of squares of HL square benefit, right? We talked about the diversity order. Sum of squares of HL square, where HL are the time domain channel types. In OFDM system, you don't get such benefit at the output of the demodulator because you are demodulating one XK at a time, where each XK sees a channel HK. Remember? The received signal RK is equal to HK, XK plus NK. If you are demodulating one XK at a time, it experiences a channel HK, and the diversity order for this symbol XK is 1. Okay, because it doesn't see the benefit of sum of squares of different fading terms. Okay. So what is HK? HK is HL e to the power minus j 2 pi KL by M. L is 0 to some length L minus 1. Okay? HK is generated from all the L taps, but if you examine the statistics of HK, if all HL are complex normal random variables, you can show that HK is also complex normal random variable, zero mean and variance dictated by the variance of the individual taps. In this case, it becomes 1 if all the taps HL have a variance of 1 over L. You can show that. I don't know if you have done this kind of exercise in probability random process. If HLs have complex normal distribution, if you have a linear combination of IID random variables, you can show that HK also has the same distribution with a different variance. Okay? These are basically the weights. Right? Weighted complex normal random variables. So having a sum of different HLs doesn't necessarily mean you get a diversity benefit. What you need is sum of squares of HLs. They have to coherently combine, then you get diversity benefit. So I'll give you a simple example. Take H1 plus H2, where H1 and H2 are complex normal random variables. So let us call it capital H. Then take H1 minus H2, let's call it H bar. If we just add two complex normal random variables, of course you can introduce a scaling of 1 over square root of 2 to do the normalization. The resultant H has the same distribution of either H1 or H2. What does that mean? That means it is as if you have one of these single taps. It's like flat fading. The other way to visualize is that these two complex numbers, random variables, can add either coherently or destructively depending on the values they take, so there is no coherent combining benefit. On the other hand, if I had H defined as absolute value of H1 plus absolute value of H2, then there is some benefit, right? If H1 is in a deep fade, H2 will protect you. On the other hand, if H is defined as H1 square absolute value plus H2 square, then there is a coherent combining benefit. If H1 happens to take a small value, hopefully H2 doesn't, because they are both independent random variables. Okay? So that is the rationale for saying that this HK doesn't have diversity benefit, right, as of now, for a given K. So it has a diversity order of 1. When you do the simulation, you will see that. The slope of the bitter red curve will be 1, okay, in the log scale. Okay? So, how would you get a diversity benefit in OFDM? We know that there are variations in frequency domain. HK changes for different values of K. Right? So H1, and if we take another value, some HN, which are sufficiently far apart, they can become uncorrelated. So what you need to do is, you have to code this data stream. So you have to embed your information in all of its xk and decode it so that your bits will experience this entire channel hk. Does it make sense? You have a bit stream, you encode it, there is a packet, let's take a sequence of bit stream, finite line, you encode it, and that results in xk. So all the bits that you want to transmit are embedded in the stream xk, so it is coded, and it goes through a channel, and it fully experiences the entire channel, h1, h2 up till hn, and then you decode this entire sequence of rks, r1 up till rn. Then if you design the code properly, you should be able to enjoy the benefit of the multipath diversity contained in the channel. It's of course highly non-trivial how to do that. It's a channel code design problem. But however, I'll give you a trivial example that shows you that it can be done. Okay, let's look at that trivial example first, and then we'll talk about a more general code design. Okay? Yeah.
How we get diversity for a particular modulated symbol.
Right.
XK.
xk is going through hk, where hk is flat faded. Okay? But you want to get diversity benefit at the receiver. So the one way of getting it is, you code the sequence, you have a bit stream, you encode it so that your bit stream is embedded not in xk in once at a particular value of k, but it's a sequence of numbers xk, k ranges from 1 to n. And then you decode this received signal corresponding to all the xk's, and this whole sequence has experienced the entire channel, and when you decode it, hopefully you'll enjoy the full diversity benefit. Of course, there's no guarantee that you'll enjoy the full diversity benefit. At least part of it you should get. But like I said, it's highly non-trivial, right? You can't see it right away. So, yeah. So, let's take a very simple code and show that it works. And the code I'm going to design here is a rate-half code, which is a repetition code. A rate-half repetition code. So what we are going to do is, we are going to repeat let's assume binary modulation for the time being, okay? Or you take one bit stream and you're going to repeat it into 2 bits, okay? And let's take the interleaver out for the time being. Okay, let's ignore it. So you have a pair of repeated bits and you'll map it to binary constellation. So you'll have a sequence of repeated symbols. So basically xk and xk plus 1 are repeated. Okay? Pairwise. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to map them to not adjacent subcarriers, but some subcarriers that are sufficiently far apart in frequency domain. That I have that kind of flexibility, right? So Rk is equal to hk xk plus nk, right? And Rk plus some k naught, some other subcarrier with spacing of k naught. I will write it as hk plus k naught multiplied by xk, because I have repeated, right? Plus nk plus k naught. So this is the repetition code I'm going to consider. Now I'm going to receive these two observations and I'm going to combine them in such a way that we'll get a diversity benefit. And the assumption here is that you're going to choose this k naught such that hk and hk plus k naught are uncorrelated. Well, if you have sufficient amount of fading, you can always, right, find a value of k naught. Okay. So the decision variable z is equal to hk conjugate rk plus hk plus k naught conjugate or k plus k naught. That is the receiver I am going to use. Have you seen this type of receiver? Have you heard of maximal ratio combining? Okay. This type of receiver maximizes the signal to noise ratio at the output of the receiver given two observations. Okay, we'll deal with this in the subsequent lectures, but take this as a particular receiver. And let's calculate the SNR at the output of the receiver. Okay, let's expand this. HK absolute value square XK plus HK plus K naught absolute value square XK. Okay, I'm taking the useful part, and then there will be two terms corresponding to the noise, right? Right, HK conjugate multiplied by RK, so there will be HK conjugate multiplied by NK. Plus HK plus K naught conjugate multiplied by NK plus K naught, and note that both NK and NK plus K naught are complex valued Gaussian random variables because they're modeled as thermal noise. Okay, now what is the signal to noise ratio associated with Z? Well, X is common in both. The signal has a component HK square plus HK plus K naught square. So we'll write it here. Okay, HK absolute value square plus HK plus K naught absolute value square, that is the amplitude of XK, right? And that is signal component, and you have to square it to get the power, signal power, divided by the total noise variance. Okay, we need the variance of sum of these two terms. Do you know what would be the variance of the sum of those two terms? Can you tell it right away? Does it make sense? The variance of this component. Well, that is nothing but expected value of square of this term, right? How did you get this? Okay? Well, you square this term, noise variances are equal for both subcarriers. Okay? Noise is, and the cross term goes to 0 when you take the expectation. And this would be this is the signal to noise ratio at the output of the demodulator for a repetition coding scheme. Okay. Sigma x square is missed. Okay, thank you. So we see the sum of squares effect. Okay, what is the diversity order here? Yeah, what is the diversity order? 2. The number of terms is the diversity order. Okay? And if you want diversity order 4, what would you have to do? Yeah, you repeat 4 times and generalize this. You will get sum of 4 terms. Okay? So the code rate that you need to get a diversity order of L is 1 over L. Well, actually it is a bound. You can't beat that. The code rate that you need to get a diversity order L is 1 over L, provided the channel has L taps. Of course, if the channel has only 2 taps, there is no point in repeating 4 times. You won't get diversity order 4. That's not going to happen. Okay? Okay. Now we have to ask ourselves a question. Instead of repeating the data in this simplified fashion using repetition coding, can we design a rate half channel code that gives you the sum of squares benefit at the output of the decoder, channel decoder, and at the same time can it give a coding gain? Is it reasonable to ask? If these were all let us say unity channels, what would you get? 1 plus 1 by, right? You get a factor of L repetition gain. And you know that channel codes are designed to give coding gain. Beyond repetition gain, channel codes are designed to give a coding gain. What is a coding gain? It's not just repeating it by 2. If the factor of 2 is not the coding gain. Coding gain is something you get beyond that. Okay. So the question is, can you design a channel code that gives you the sum of squares type of benefit as well as an additional coding gain? Well, it's possible. Okay. So what I want you to do is, I'll give you a convolutional code of arbitrary rate half or rate 2/3. You can configure it. You plug in this convolutional code, write an interleaver. You write a simple interleaver. Some MATLAB has some pseudo random interleaver or something. Use that. You already have this. Transmit through OFDM. Receive them, and I'll give you the decoder. Decode it and plot the error rate. And control the multipath channel length L equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, and see what kind of diversity order you will get. With a rate half code, if you have channel length L equal to 2, you will get a diversity order 2, right? I mean, that's what repetition code gives you that. So a properly designed rate half convolutional code or a block code should give you that. Okay? What if, let me ask you this question, the channel has 8 taps in time domain, and your code rate is half. What is the diversity order you can expect? Well, with the repetition code, it can't be more than 2, but with a properly designed convolutional code or a block code, can you get a higher diversity order? Well, that's a highly non-trivial question. The answer lies in what is called modified singleton bound. Okay, this is something that comes from block coding theory. Okay, if you are interested, you can read the reference I'll give you a reference. You can read it. That could be a good project for somebody for 6 months or so. Okay, now we'll talk about what is called modified singleton bound, and it completely reveals the fundamental trade-off between code rate and diversity order. You can't beat that. Okay, so we'll give you that fundamental trade-off, and I'll give you a MATLAB code with a convolutional code. You simulate it and see if these bounds are met. You can just see it for yourself by simulation. Okay, so the transmission rate R is R times log m base 2. By the way, this formulation is only valid for the kind of transmitter we have chosen here, which is called bit interleaved coded modulation. What does that mean? There is a binary channel code, there are bits, they are interleaved, and you are going to choose a modulation. It's called bit interleaved coded modulation. DICM. What would be the other approach? Well, there is another way of handling this modulation and coding. You can combine coding and modulation into a single encoder. You have bits and there is a black box that gives you XK. You have bits, there is a black box encoder that gives you XK and the rate would be R. There is no small r here anymore. That is called coded modulation. And an example is a trellis coded modulation. Okay, we'll not look into that. We'll look at this simplified approach. Okay, we'll not get into coded modulation here. We'll just look at this bit interleaved coded modulation, which is widely used in most wireless systems. And for this bit interleaved coded modulation approach, what would be the fundamental trade-off between code rate and diversity order? But the trade-off that I'm going to provide is more general. It is applicable to any modulation, any coding scheme, but we will restrict it to this particular framework. Okay. Let F be the diversity order. What does it mean? This is the diversity order you have achieved. Let F be the diversity order. And L is the number of independently faded taps contained in the multipath channel. We know that. When you transform this H of L into H of K, the diversity contained in the multipath diversity effect contained in H of K is still L, but it's not so obvious to see. So what we'll assume is that this H of K can be broken into L segments. H of K will be broken into L segments where each segment has a flat fading coefficient. Although it is varying slowly, we'll approximate this chunk having H1, this chunk having H2, this chunk having H3 up till HF. So all the tones here will see H1. It's an approximate. It's called block fading channel. Why is that? In the time domain you have a diversity order L. In frequency domain you must have a diversity order L because just transformation doesn't change the diversity. So you have L independent channel coefficients in frequency domain. Okay? That's a crude way of explaining it. Okay, it's not mathematically precise, but you can get to that. Okay, it's a model. Let's say you take it as a model. HK is in fact slowly varying because it's a DFT, right? But we'll assume that within a block we'll approximate it as flat. Like it's like a piecewise linear representation. Okay? And these HLs, H1 and H2 are uncorrelated, are statistically independent of each other because they are complex coefficients. Okay. F is the diversity order, is the target diversity order. And the modified singleton bound says that modified singleton bound says that F is less than or equal to 1 plus L multiplied by 1 minus capital R by log M base 2. And you put the symbol, it's a floor operation. So you round it off to the left integer. Okay, if you have 1.2, you round it off to 1. You round it to the left. It's a floor operation, right? Huh? Is it? You haven't used MATLAB? Yeah. So you round it off to the nearest left integer. If I get 1.2, you round it off to 1, not to 2. Okay. Okay, so now, see, this is a very general bound. It is applicable to a general system. In fact, you can choose any rate R you want, and you can choose F, and you can figure out what is the modulation size needed to achieve that bound. That is a more general problem, but we will not look into that. we'll restrict ourselves to this framework where R is defined as small r multiplied by log m base 2. So what is the ratio of r by small m log m base 2? Well, that is a small r, right? That is small r. So m doesn't play a role in our framework. You can choose any m you want, BPSK, QPSK and all. What matters is this. Okay? So we're going to replace this with small r. This is our bound, where r is the code, the type of code we are considering. It's a binary channel code. M is not there in the picture. Okay. Now, given a code rate of half and L equal to 2, what is the diversity order you will get? Can you calculate and tell me?
Less than 2.
Not less than 2, it is 2.
Less than or equal.
That's because you can hit, it's less than or equal, but you can make it 2. You can design it such that. Okay? If L equal to 4, what would be the diversity order you will get?
3.
So we can get more than 2. You can do a simulation with a rate half code, multipath channel length 4, you should get a diversity order 3. And L equal to 8? 5. So L equal to 20? Yeah. And see, beyond 4, diversity order, the returns are diminishing. You know, if you look at the probability of error curves, diversity order 1, diversity order 2, the maximum gain comes from 1 to 2, and then a little gain from 3, 4, and beyond 4, it goes towards AWGN. So beyond 4, diversity gain is, no, you don't want to shoot beyond 4, 5, 6 diversity order. So if you have a broadband channel with L equal to 20, now you can figure out what is the code rate you need to get a diversity order of whatever target you want.
But this is a bound.
Yes, this is a bound, you can achieve that.
So does
You have to design codes to meet that, but it turns out that the standard codes you find in designed for AWGN channels turn out to be good codes for this case also. The standard codes designed for AWGN channels, like convolutional codes and block codes, turn out to be good codes. There may be exceptions here and there, but most codes designed for AWGN channel turn out to be good codes. So you don't have to do anything special. That's a great thing about it. On the other hand, you can go on and design codes to optimize it, but you can see, read this paper by Raymond Nook. It's a very good paper. The title is on coding for block fading channels. Okay, this bound comes from the paper, and that's his PhD thesis. He designed a number of codes, but he was not able to beat simple off-the-shelf codes picked from Provokeys or some other textbook. Okay? Okay, you can tailor-make the codes to optimize for this. Okay, and this bound also tells you something more. If there is a channel with the diversity L, what is the maximum code rate you need to get a diversity order L here? Can you work it out? That turns out to be 1 over L. If the channel has L taps, and if you want Lth order diversity, then the rate, maximum rate is 1 over L. The inequality helps there. The maximum rate is 1 over L, and repetition coding achieves that. So the point is, we shouldn't really shoot for the maximum diversity when a channel has plenty of diversity. Perhaps you should choose a modest diversity of 4 or something, and try to increase the rate R so that the transmission rate will increase. Okay, that's how we should do it. That is for fixed transmission. But on the other hand, if the receiver continually tells you the mutual information, then you are going to transmit anyway at the mutual information slightly below the mutual information. There are no outages. That is with feedback. Without feedback, if you don't know anything about the channel, then this is something you could do. You agree on a diversity order, let's say 4, 5 or 6, and then choose R suitably because L is known to the transmitter. Okay, the next exercise would be, I'll send you the MATLAB codes and you take a multipath channel and simulate the coded bit error rate and look at the various diversity orders you get and see if they are consistent with these bounds. Only thing you would have to do with, I will give you the code for here, and you have already built the OFDM transmitter, and you would have to build the CP and multipath channel. You have to model it. This interleaver, use a random interleaver or something. MATLAB has some interleaver. Just search for it. Use a random interleaver. Okay. And how would you model the multipath channel? Each HL is modeled as complex normal, zero mean, 1 by n variance. MATLAB, how would you do it? Rand n, zero mean, variance 1 over L plus square root of minus 1, rand n, zero mean, 1 over L, and the whole thing is divided by root 2. Okay, this is for one tap, and you will have to do it for L tap. So you can do, rand n can also generate vectors. Okay, that is how you generate the channel. In fact, additive white Gaussian noise is also generated something like that. It's not 1 over L, but it's 1 over noise variance is n naught, and you generate a sequence. Okay. This more or less completes the characterization of the link, right? We talked about OFDM, the wireless channel, receiver, a channel encoder, decoder. The only thing that I have not done is I haven't talked about the design of the channel codes, which in itself is a separate course. Okay, you need to take error correction course to understand design of block codes, convolutional codes, turbo codes, and so on and so forth. Okay, but you can always use a channel code and see what the performance is like. Use it as a tool. Okay, so what we will do next is we'll now go through the specifications of the 4G LTE standard and see how this framework carries over to a real system. Exactly the same type of framework. Okay, I think we have about 10 minutes, we can do it. Okay, let me erase this. You learn the most by doing simulations. Listening to lectures, it's okay. You may understand or not understand, but even if you think that you understand, but in reality, you really understand it when you simulate it. That is only the proof of the pudding. You have to write your own code, make mistakes, correct them, get the results, compare with theoretical results. Then you know that you understand something. Simulation is the only way. Okay. No amount of theory can give you the side of the kind of insight simulation gives. Although you are exactly simulating what the theory says, right? But the way you understand it will be different when you simulate it. Okay, so we're going to take this 4G LTE standard. How many of you heard of this? Yeah, this is something it's being deployed in India also. Okay, we will talk about downlink. Uplink of LTE uses something called single carrier FDMA, which we will discuss briefly. First, we'll discuss the downlink. Okay. Downlink is called DS, downlink. Okay? It uses what is called OFDMA. See, there is this A here at the end. What is that? We know OFDM, orthogonal frequency division multiplexing. Orthogonal frequency division multiple access. Why there is multiple access? Well, there is one base station. It is serving a number of users. All these users are accessing this bandwidth. So it's called multiple people accessing the channel. Channel here is the bandwidth. So simultaneously you have to support a number of users. What we have talked about is a basic single transmitter. Okay, but the single transmitter has to support many users. How do you do that? Well, give different tones to different users. A group of one chunk of tones to one user, another chunk to another user. Right? It's called like FDMA, right? But in OFDMA you have a lot of flexibility. You can give users, schedule users both in time and frequency. We'll see that. Okay. LTE supports a number of bandwidths. That's the beauty of these things. Traditionally GSM has only one single bandwidth. CDMA has single bandwidth. But LTE can support multiple bandwidths. It doesn't mean that it supports multiple bandwidths at the same time. The system can be configured for different bandwidths depending on how much bandwidth the operator has. 10 megahertz, 20 megahertz, 30 megahertz, not 30, 5 or something like that. So the bandwidths supported 1.4, they're all in megahertz, 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 megahertz. So when I say 20 megahertz, the regulator has to assign a full 20 megahertz to the operator. Okay? But you will not fully occupy 20 megahertz, you will occupy maybe something like 18 megahertz, and then the rest of the 2 megahertz used to taper off the signal down. But sometimes you need a little more than 20 so that you don't leak into the adjacent channels. Okay? Sometimes the regulator also gives you some guard in between. So he doesn't allocate the next 20 to somebody right away, he may leave some guard. Okay? So that is also needed. But in any case, if you have 20 megahertz, you can operate LTE in 20 megahertz, or if you only have 10 megahertz, you can design the system for 10 megahertz. Okay? And the design is so flexible that with some small changes in the receiver and the transmitter, you can make this happen. Okay, let's see how it works. There is what is called minimum TTI. TTI means transmission time interval. This is the minimum unit for transmission. Okay? Is 1 millisecond. This is the minimum granularity you are going to transmit it. 20 megahertz, 1 millisecond is the minimum granularity. When you transmit, you are transmitting in this. At least 1 millisecond, if not all the 20 megahertz. Okay, you don't transmit like 1/4 of this. This is the minimum granularity. Okay? Subcarrier spacing. That is fixed. Whether you use 10, 20 or 15 megahertz, subcarrier spacing does not change. Cyclic prefix length. You have two cyclic prefixes. One is short, which is 4.7 approximately microseconds, and the other is long, where if you deploy this in hilly areas like Mandi and so on and so forth, the delay spread can be high because mountains can cause long reflections. You can use long cyclic prefix, and it is 16.7 microseconds. You have a choice. You use one or the other. Modulation. It supports QPSK, 16 QAM and 64 QAM. Okay, why you have these modulations? Well, depending on the SNR, you have to adjust the code rate and modulation. We just talked about it, right? And it supports MIMO, which we will not talk about now, but we'll discuss this once we go through the lectures on MIMO. Okay? Okay, there are few other parameters that I will talk about. The sampling frequency Fs is equal to 30.72 into 10 raised to 6 samples per second. What is the sampling frequency? See, one OFDIMM symbol you are going to divide into n chunks. That is the sampling frequency, number of samples per second. That is fixed independent of the bandwidth. Okay? And Ts is equal to 1 over Fs. Ts is the time duration between successive samples.
Sampling frequency is 1 over n delta f. So when n changes means when bandwidth changes, n changes. So we can use less sampling rate and high sampling rate.
You can, but let's stick to these numbers and see how you can adjust it. Okay? There are a number of other ways. We'll come back to that. Let me just finish this. N is 2048. Okay, I think that is for, I don't know if it is fixed for all the cases. I think it is for 20 megahertz and 10 megahertz, 20, 15 and 10 is 2048. They might use a different value of n for lower bandwidths, like 5 megahertz. Maybe they use 512. I think for 5 megahertz it is 512. So n can change. Okay? I mean, it makes sense, right? Lower bandwidth, lower L because subcarrier spacing is fixed. Okay? And like you said, the sampling frequency, you can probably change it, but you can first start with this sampling frequency because it's something tied to the crystal oscillator. So you don't want to have another crystal oscillator, right? So you have a master crystal oscillator that gives you this master sampling frequency, and you can decimate it. Or you sample at this rate and then decimate the. Okay, you sample at a higher rate and then decimate it. So it's totally up to implementation. Okay, but this is a very important parameter because this is the fundamental clock frequency. You know what I'm talking about? There is a clock at the receiver. That frequency has to be the master clock has to deliver at certain frequency, and then everything else is derived from that. You can't have different crystal oscillators for different bandwidths. That's what we mean. Okay, so the RF components will not change in the receiver. Only the digital signal processing will change when you change the bandwidth. That's all. Everything is discrete time implementation. The RF portions will not change. So that is the level of flexibility OFDM offers. You may say, if it is 5 megahertz bandwidth, why should I have a front end filter taking maybe a 20 megahertz signal? Okay, all those questions arise, but the point here is that the level of flexibility it offers. You can make proprietary tweaks if you wish. Okay, out of 2048 for 20 megahertz, let's just take 20 megahertz as an example. Okay, instead of worrying about all other modes. N used, the number of used subcarriers is 1201. And if you multiply with 15 kilohertz, you get approximately 18.015 megahertz. So this is actually what you occupy. Well, you occupy 20, but then the side lobes will go on. So you null out so many. But you may say, why are you operating at 2048? Why can't you design the system for 1200 or 1300? Well, I mean, you have to build an FFT circuit. You can't have any number you want. 2048 is a power of 2. You can have a very efficient FFT circuit either in DSPs or ASICs. So you agree on that 2048. You don't tinker with this number. Okay, this is FS at 2048. You don't want to change. The other things you can change in DSP. Okay. And obviously I said bandwidth is 20 megahertz. Okay, this is from the radio point of view. Then the system has what is called. You have a few minutes. Okay, well, another lecture or what? Okay, I will just take a few minutes. When you transmit from the base station, everything is transmitted with some fundamental units. Like when we say I transmit a packet of data, right? Like you need some fundamental units. And in LTE, the fundamental unit is you have to transmit for at least 1 millisecond, right? That's the minimum time duration. And from the time frequency grid point of view, there is what is called a resource block. Okay, let's talk about a resource block. A physical resource block. We'll explain the significance of it. Sometimes we call it RB also. PRB, physical resource block. A physical resource block is defined as 12 subcarriers multiplied by 0.5 milliseconds. And that turns out to be 14 OFDM symbols. 0.5 milliseconds has 14 OFDM symbols. So this turns out to be 12 by 14. These are the subcarriers, these are OFDM symbols. Everything is two-dimensional. 12 subcarriers, 14 OFDM symbols. I think it's 0.5 milliseconds is probably 7 OFDM symbols. And you always allocate 2 resource blocks at a time. Okay, so total you always allocate 2 RBs at a time, 2 adjacent RBs at a time. That gives you 12 by 14. So total it will be 1 millisecond. Okay, and 1 millisecond is the minimum transmission time interval. That makes sense? 1 RB spans 0.5 milliseconds, 7 OFDM symbols. You always allocate 2 adjacent RBs, that is the fundamental unit, and that is 12 by 14, and 14 OFDM symbols occupy 1 millisecond, and we said this is the minimum transmission time interval. So the minimum that you can transmit at base station is, as a user to you, I can give you 2 RBs, 12 subcarriers, 14 OFDM symbols over 1 millisecond, and 12 subcarriers is how much bandwidth? 180 kilohertz. 12 subcarriers is 180 kilohertz. So that's approximately GSM bandwidth, 200 kilohertz. Okay? If I want to send voice to you, I can take 180 kilohertz 12 subcarriers and transmit to you, not continuously, but enough resource blocks so that the voice channel goes through. I can do that continuously. But of course, I don't have to send the same subcarriers in the same time frame. I can also jump to a different frequency. Okay? If you want to get diversity benefit. That's the level of flexibility OFDM offers. Okay? And one subcarrier by one OFDM symbol is called one resource element. One subcarrier by one OFDM symbol is called one resource element, in short written as RE, one resource element. Okay, now we'll close this lecture by defining what is called a radio frame and a subframe. So the data is organized into frames and subframes. Okay, we said the minimum transmission time interval is 1 millisecond. Okay, and a resource block has 12 by 14. You know, there is a lot of significance to this resource block. it occupies 1 millisecond. Channel doesn't vary a whole lot within 1 millisecond. Right? There are 12 subcarriers. You insert pilots sporadically at different points. Right? You put like 6 pilots in 12 by 14 grid. And from these 6 pilots, you acquire the channel, interpolate it to the remaining resource elements. Right? You put 6 pilots, you disperse them in 12 by 14 grid. Receiver acquires the channel and estimate the channel for the entire grid. And you assume that the channel doesn't change very fast within 1 millisecond. Well, if you are on a high-speed train, it does change very fast. If it changes very fast, you have to track it. Use very sophisticated signal processing to track the variations in the channel using the pilots. That is the reason why we have two resource block as the fundamental unit or one resource block. It can be used for receiver processing. So receiver collects 1 or 2 resource blocks and estimates the channel from that. That's why we call it a fundamental unit. Okay. So in addition to that, we have a radio frame which is of duration 10 milliseconds. And that would be equal to 30,072 TS into TS. TS is the duration between successive samples. And within this one radio frame, there are 20 slots. Slots, and each slot has 0.5 milliseconds. How many OFDM symbols? 0.5 milliseconds, 7 OFDM symbols. Okay? So one slot, T slot, is equal to 15,360 TS, that is equal to 0.5 milliseconds. So in one slot you have 15,360 samples. In one frame we have those many samples, right, with the TS spacing. And two slots clubbed together are called one subframe. And one subframe is 14 OFDM symbols, the entire bandwidth. And scheduling is done at the base station on subframe level. So you have, let's say, 100 users in the system. You know, users are sending some reports. I want so much bandwidth. This is my channel quality. The base station schedules users on a subframe level. Okay. And the system supports what is called TDD and FDD. Have you heard this? Have you heard this? Yeah. TDD and frequency division duplex, that is uplink and downlink are different carriers, each with 20 megahertz. But in TDD, there is a single carrier with 20 megahertz. The uplink and downlink are time shaped. So LTE supports both. Okay. So with this, we stop the description of the basic physical layer, and we'll move on to other topics later. Okay. So will you be able to complete the exercises in time?
Could you shift that date because it's on Saturday?
Which one?
18.
No, I made it Friday, right? You want it on Saturday?
No, we don't want it on Saturday.
Huh?
18th is Saturday.
Is it?
Yeah, today is 15th.
No, the first deadline is what, 16th?
Yeah, tomorrow is fine.
So my second one should be, oh, I said 18th.
Yeah,
You want it 19th maybe?
20th, the Monday.
No, see, the semester is only there for 2 more weeks after that. So we have to complete this 17th. Because we must, then you have to integrate the convolutional code that will complete this whole thing. So that requires one more. 18th you will do it? So you said there is a conflict.
It was a Saturday, we'll have to come back.
Well, you have to work hard for this course. I am working hard, it's my vacation time. I am, I am not here to collect extra money. You better do it. I mean, it's in your best interest. Because you need to integrate the convolutional code after this. That will take a day at least. Although I give you the codes, it's still some exercise. And then we'll have to do MIMO. And in MIMO, there will be a couple of exercises. Right? So this is a short course. So you have to live with these tight deadlines. But it is well worth it. Trust me. All those simulation works. Many students told me that.